the center, Chris Thury, as Executive Director, located at 900 Whiting Drive. What is your pleasure?
Move the consent agenda.
Moving on to old business, number one is consideration of memorandum 23-109 regarding the request for a special events on sale liquor license for one day, August 13th, 2023, from the VFW at 209 Cedar Street. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the audience? Roll call.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Huttenhoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number two under old business is consideration of memorandum 23-110 regarding the request for a special events retail on-sale liquor license for 7 days, which is July 6, 13, 2027, and August 3, 10, and 17, 2023, from Ben's Brewing Company, Ben Hanton owner, at 222 West 3rd Street, for music at the Meridian, located down in the green space in the west side of the Meridian Bridge Plaza area. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Huttenhoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number three under old business is consideration of memorandum 23-111 regarding the request for a special events retail on-sale liquor license for one day, July 8th, 2023, from BPO Elks Lodge 994. Joe Sparks, President, that is located at 504 West 27th Street for an event on the lawn. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Huttenhoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number four under old business is consideration of memorandum 23-112 regarding the request for a special events on-sale liquor license for Saturday, September 2nd, 2023, from Stripes, Inc., Jeff Dayhoff owner, doing business as Mojo's 3rd Street Pizza, for an event at the Meridian venue located at 101 East 3rd Street. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion on this?
I'd like to ask the city attorney, I wasn't able to talk to him before the meeting, but, so this is a quasi judicial action. Are we limited in our votes on something like this in terms of, would a no vote have to meet a certain reason or qualification in terms of the legal aspect?
It would have to fall within the criteria, well, you guys can vote no, whatever you like, but it would have to be based upon one of the legal foundations for saying no. When I last researched this question specifically, which was maybe a couple months ago, so maybe a little rusty, but it comes down to the character of the applicant, the suitability of the location, and there isn't a lot of guidance in state law as to what meets that criteria.
So the commissioner has discretion to determine that?
I believe so, as long as you go back to the rational basis test in constitutional law. It's basically, it can't be arbitrary and capricious. You got to have it tether back to something rational. And I recommend stating for the record, if anybody is going to vote no, the reason for doing so, just so it's in the record.
You don't require that?
Not necessarily. Just know that the standard would be when it's brought on appeal to a court, if that were to take place, that it would have to, it could not be arbitrary and capricious, which is, you know whose opinion that would be. It'd be up to the judge, right? Is it arbitrary and capricious? Can you articulate why it's not arbitrary and capricious? So in order to support your opinion, I would recommend stating the reason, but
Okay.
it's up to you guys. That's just kind of a very quick primer on the state of the law there.
Al, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Oh, I saw your finger on the button. I thought maybe you had some Alism. Okay. Any other commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanhoff.
No.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 5, under old business, is a second reading and a public hearing, which, for consideration of ordinance 1073, an amendment to the provisions of the parking ordinance after snow emergencies on non-snow emergency route streets and in municipal parking lots, and creating an exception for time limits in posted municipal lots. I have asked City Manager Leone to walk us through what is being presented to the commission tonight for consideration before I ask what the pleasure of the commission is.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and Commissioners. In your packet, you have an ordinance amendment relating to parking on non-snow emergency routes and in our municipal parking lots after snow emergencies. And what it does really is two things. It clears up a confusing part of the current language and gives us a little bit of latitude here as we go forward into next winter, if you so should choose to use it. The existing language leaves out the reference to municipal lots in that second sentence, even though the first sentence does specify the reference to include them in the provisions. The intention and application of the code has always been to include both types, but it doesn't say both parking and snow emergency routes. So that's a very minor change, changing instead of changing it to include both in both sentences. We also have another type of difficulty sometimes managing downtown parking lot situations during downtown events, and we think that that will continue, especially as we have more parking downtown. There may need to be a need to consider extending the time limit in some of our public lots. We're going to be taking a look at that for residential occupancies downtown. It makes it tough for people that live downtown to adhere to that stricter time limit in big snow events. So we have that exception now in the ordinance so that if we want to sign, for example, one of our lots to allow for a longer period of time, we can certainly do that. But we didn't want to necessarily set that time, and we don't necessarily know if that's needed yet, but wanted to make that provision in the language so that we can react quickly, quicker than you all can post a, public hearing and change an ordinance. If we would need that, as we know here in upcoming seasons, we're going to have more folks living downtown. So we do have parking provisions for those people as well, but some, of course, will be parking in the public space. Happy to answer any questions. Our city engineers, police chief, and community development director worked on this language. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, City Manager Leone. Understanding what's being brought in front of you tonight, what's the pleasure of the commission?
Move to approve.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. Are there any commission questions, discussion on this agenda item? Seeing none, are there any questions or comments from the, yes, step on up to the mic.
Paul Harns. I'm not sure why I've talked to the city about this for several years when I used to live on 6th Street. Your one-way streets, one side of the street parking does not make sense. Where it is easy for them to plow, because it basically just goes east and west. Where if you would have one side of the street parking going north and south, pick one side and have them not park there, it'd be a lot easier for the snowplows. And I've suggested that before. It's been a few years since I've done that. I don't know if you've ever considered that, but you probably should, especially in a historical neighborhood. Those neighborhoods, if those of you who have lived down there or driven down there, it is a mess when it snows because you got people parking in those narrow streets on both sides of the street. I've talked to city engineer years ago, but I quit doing it because it was useless. But like, for example, on 6th Street, it starts up at the top, and it's no parking, I think, if I remember correctly, on the south side of the road. It goes all the way down till you hit the alley between Douglas and, what's the next street over? Douglas? It's where the Catholic Church is. Capitol Street. It stops at Craig Johnson's house there at the alley. Then it doesn't pick up again for a block and a half. Then you start it again with the no parking on one side of the street. That doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, but really where you need the one side street parking is on the North and South Street that are so narrow where there should only be parking on one side of the street. And I've talked to people down there, and again, this was years ago, they said they didn't care if there was no parking as long as they say one side or the other. But I talked to the city parks, I mean, the city streets before that, and they said, well, it's never been discussed. Well, I throw it out.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the public? Roll call.
Hunoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Mayor Mosher.
Aye, motion carries. Number 6 under old business is as requested at the City Commission meeting on June 12, 2023, consideration of extending the SAC task force. So in just trying to figure out how to tackle this tonight, Amy, did you want to just kind of go over some highlights again of the task force to bring that? I know sometimes we get different people hearing meetings, and maybe start with what the task force has recommended as far as pertaining to the agenda item tonight, and then I believe Commissioner Hunoff will have some thoughts he wants to share as well.
Okay, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission, so the Summit Activities Task Force was created sometime late last summer, early fall, and that was to get some recommendations from the community members and those interested in the Summit Activity Center on how to move forward there with the facility. So the original recommendations that were worked on through that committee, and those committee members, task force members are listed, were presented to you, I believe, on April 24th of this year. And there's a number of recommendations there, broad-based. Also included in the packet are the detailed recommendations. So wanted to make sure that you had access to those, commissioners. The Summit Activities Task Force, of course, did, but hadn't put them all before you. And so that memo that I presented on the 24th of April was really the overview. But one of the points was the duration of the task force. And so there was some consensus, perhaps, and I say perhaps because that seems to be the question here for you, about whether or not the task force should continue. And as you know, we have a city school committee. We share that space with the Yankton School District, and so we have a city school committee, which some of you sit on, to discuss that space and discuss anything that occurs in that shared facility, including the capital and operations of as they affect space use, which almost all of them do. So that committee exists and stands, and we also have the Parks Advisory Board. However, while we've had many Parks Advisory Board members who are also Summit Activities Board members, we did not have anything within your ordinance that required any of the Parks Advisory Board members to be Summit Activities Center members. So the conclusion at that final Summit Activities Task Force meeting was that we recommend the task force, when I say we, that the Parks Advisory Board is required, which would take an ordinance change to include some folks that are actually Summit Activity Center members. Now, fast forward to the mayor's recommendations for boards and committees. We do have now seated members on that Parks Advisory Board who are Summit Activity Center members. However, you have not made an ordinance change. There's been discussion that there's interest in continuing the Summit Activities task force, apart from the Parks Advisory Board and the City School Committee. And if that's the pleasure of the commission, staff and I request that we just have very clear direction as to what we're doing, duration, et cetera, and how that all is going to work, because we want to make sure we're following the pleasure of the majority of the commission. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. We'll point you also to your packet to look for notes and some of the more detailed ideas, et cetera, that came out of that task force. And as you know, we have implemented some of the things already, as you have passed new rates, and we're working through changes within the facility.
Thank you for walking us through that. Commissioner Hunoff, I know this was your thought a couple weeks ago that you brought in front of the commission, so maybe you want to give what you're wanting to be discussed tonight.
Thank you. We mentioned wanting to continue it at the last meeting on a quarterly basis for 3 years, total of 12 meetings. And some of the reasons mentioned, I won't go through the whole list, but many of us who were on the task force believe our work is not done. And we believe local government can never have too much public input. Having citizens eager to volunteer their input is an asset that should be valued and viewed as a positive thing. I, for one, prefer that to the citizen apathy we sometimes see in election turnouts or budget hearing attendance. Here we have citizens who want to provide us their input. City Manager Leon had said in the packet that she wanted some clear direction if this is approved. So rather than go through my whole list of comments from 2 weeks ago, I'd like to focus on Amy's request with some specific ideas as far as the kind of direction she may be requesting. And these are suggestions I offer after consulting with several task force members. So when I say we, I'm not referring to just myself. There's several other task force members included in that. We'd like to first of all modify our request from a 3-year continuation of the task force to 2 years. So again, this would amount to 8 meetings over a 2-year span, held every 3 months. And that should be more than enough time to know if our plans for improvement have been effective or not. And we also like the idea of renaming this temporary group the Summit Activity Center Advisory Committee. Get away from the words task force, which some of you correctly noted last week, has wrapped up its findings and recommendations. So the purpose for a temporary committee would be to evaluate the progression of goals and continue to serve as a conduit from Summit users. The task force meetings included up to 5 city staff at times, plus 2 current commissioners, so it's very heavy on city input. Going forward, we feel 1 commissioner and 1 staff liaison would be more than adequate. That would reduce our imposition on city staff time. And we believe the logical staff liaison for these 4 meetings a year would be Luke Yeomans, who's the new city events and recreation manager. Task force members who have indicated interest, and I'm getting specific because this is my idea of clear direction. Those who have expressed interest in continuing were Brian Birch, Vince Jennis, Sam Mason, Cody Kneifel, and Gina Hawk. And we would also have a few people to replace, so our recommendation for those spots would be Eugene Hornstra, Tim Branow, and Larry Winia. These are great Summit members who've shown strong interest in our collective goal of more members, more revenue, and a better Summit Activity Center. We would propose this group meet at the Summit at 5:30 on the first Thursday of every quarter, and that the public be invited to attend and offer brief public comments, much the same as we do here at our City Commission meeting. And I suggest that because, as you know, we had 3 times more people volunteer to serve on the task force than we had spots available. So this would be their opportunity to come and if they have a specific concern, they could offer it. As has been suggested, the Parks Board could serve as this advisory committee, but they already have so much on their plate. I'm not going to go through the list, but they have a lot to discuss involving outdoor functions and parks, and it would be difficult for them to provide the kind of singular focus and informed input that the former task force members could provide based on all the months of learning they've done on this issue. So simply put, this is a no-cost proposal that encourages public input. We think it could keep the current positive momentum we see at the summit, keep it going in the right direction. So I thank you for listening. Eventually, I'd like to make a motion for this temporary committee, but I believe there may be a few audience members who wish to speak before that, so thank you.
Can I go ahead? I think this is all great information, and I think it would have been great information to have shared at the task force when the task force was taking place. I'm not against having the Summit Activity Center and having an advisory board or the task force, or even continuing on. The issue that I have is that we had a task force, we had meetings, and the point of those meetings is to come to conclusions and to come to direction. Brian, you had stated before that you had gone to all the meetings and attended everything except for the last hour, correct? Last year, I'm going to back this up to a personal level. I wanted to be here in person. I'm working out in the Panhandle in Nebraska. I wanted to come back because last week I did this remotely via Zoom, and my batteries died just at the end when this was discussed. And I wanted a chance to discuss this because I feel like I have a personal viewpoint on this that I think is valid. Last year, I have a son, Ryland, who's a senior in high school. You know Ryland. Fantastic kid, was really involved in two things at the high school. He wasn't involved in sports then. He was involved in debate, and he was involved in orchestra. Okay, so two things. I myself didn't know that much about debate. I played sports and that. I didn't do debate. Debate is not a spectator sport. You don't go and watch your child debate. It's not allowed. So there's orchestra. All right, orchestra has less than a handful of concerts for the season, okay? And those concerts are on Monday nights, which is the same night that we have commission meetings, right? So of those handful, I missed over 50% of them. So I got to go see a couple of them because I felt that I ran for commission. I'm here. I need to be here because it's my obligation to be here. So I missed those few concerts, those few chances of seeing my son. He's a senior. He's now graduated. He's going to School of Mines this next year. I'm proud as all get out. Included in those that I missed were his senior solo. So I did not get to see him perform. I did not get to tell him, man, you did a great job. I got to tell him, I heard you did a great job. From the video, it looks like you did a great job. Now, I'm not going to ever fault anyone for choosing to go to watch their child, family member, whoever. I'm never going to fault someone for choosing that direction instead of being at the meeting, right? However, if you choose to not be at the meeting, then you are forfeiting your time at the meeting. You are not at the meeting. And conclusions that are made and directions that are made at that meeting, I don't feel it's all right to then go back and say, well, I wasn't there, and I dispute the conclusions of the meeting. I think if you're not there, you're not there. Now, that being said, I don't want that to get in the way of the Summit Activity Center. I am all for the Summit Activity Center. It has been made clear to us that the public has wanted to come in, that the public wants to continue to have the Summit Activity Center, to continue to subsidize the Summit Activity Center, because that's the facts of things. So if that means that we need to extend the task force or an advisory board, my suggestion is that we give it a year's time, and at a year's time from when the task force ended, because it was a task force, it did have a beginning and an end to it. If within a year's time, we decide that we need to have an advisory board for the Summit Activity Center, a standalone, then I'm all for that. What I'm not for is we have meetings, we come to conclusions, and then, well, I didn't agree with that conclusion, so now I want to unravel that. Because I wasn't at the end of the meeting when the conclusions were made. That's where I have a problem with. We all make sacrifices of our time to be here, to make these decisions, and I feel that we need to make these decisions, and then we need to move on. And if we need to adjust those, so be it. But don't go back and change these decisions just because you don't agree with them and just because you weren't present at the time of the meeting. Thank you.
Ben, thank you for those comments, because you've really hit on something that I've been struggling with on this issue. I keep going back to this rule of St. Benedict. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep going back to the rule of St. Benedict. You know, I work for a Benedictine organization, and so we're constantly being reminded of the teachings of St. Benedict, and it's listen with the ear of your heart. And I keep repeating that phrase because when I reflect on what has transpired on this issue over the last couple months, I start feeling emotions of anger because I'm struggling to understand how Commissioner Hunoff sees himself working with his fellow commission members and city staff in good faith. And yet, despite those feelings, I want to make sure I'm listening. Commissioner Hunoff, I would ask you to do the same. I've known you for 20 years. We've shared many conversations. We agree on many things, many more things than we disagree on. And we need to work together to tackle the challenges ahead of us. But I'm really struggling with the actions you have taken on this particular issue. So I'm going to share some thoughts, and I hope you will listen with to my perspective on this and listen with the ear of your heart. So at our last meeting, you told the commission that Task Force member Charlie Gross supported the proposal to extend the group for 3 years. I raised my eyebrows at that time because I had spoken with Charlie in the days before that meeting, and he was quite clear with me that he did not support it. And minutes after you said he supported it, Charlie himself stood before us and said that he didn't support it. So how am I supposed to interpret that? Were you lying to us?
Before we get lost in the
misleading us?
points, Charlie told me shortly before the meeting that he would continue serving if the commission approved.
Commissioner Johnson has the mic. You'll have to be recognized. Thank you.
So, you know, were you lying to us? Were you misleading us? Was it something else that I just don't understand? And obviously you have a point of view on this. You attended 8 90-minute task force meetings, but missed the last hour of the final meeting to attend an event in which your daughter was involved. It's very understandable. You are a father, and you were where you were needed. But at our last city commission meeting, you suggested that in your absence, the task force was somehow bamboozled by city staff into making bad recommendations, which is why you said you have brought us 2 different recommendations. And tonight we heard a 3rd variation on those recommendations. You say the task force supports after their official work ended. And this is despite the fact that 2 of our own commissioners on the task force who were there said the recommendations originally shared with us by the city manager reflected the discussion of the task force. Can you see how this could be felt as insulting to Commissioner Schramm and Mayor Mosier? Can you see how it could be felt as insulting to the task force? Can you see how difficult it is for me to understand how the very people who run the day-to-day operations of the SAC and who will be charged with carrying out the recommendations, our staff members should not be a part of the recommendation discussion. And what if every task force member took this approach, if we extended the group? Can you see how you have set a standard where if a task force member does not feel the consensus reflects their views when they are together in the room, they can just keep working over the task force members in private until they get their way? This puts the commission in the position now of having to discern what the real recommendations of the task force are. In less than 2 months, we've received now 4 versions of the task force recommendations if we count the city manager's version. I feel strongly that this is a distraction and unsustainable. So I think the way this has unfolded has demonstrated the pitfalls of continuing with the task force. As government officials, we have to strike a delicate balance between taking public input and making decisions. We've reached a point now where the task force has worked with us in good faith, spent hours and hours researching the SAC operation and offering recommendations, and completed the tasks that we asked them to contribute to the success of the Summit Activity Center. We've also received the results of a public survey, and anyone from the public can continue to reach out to us, to staff members, Luke has his office in the building even, so we can take ideas and suggestions. That doesn't stop with the end of the task force. So I think that the signs are starting to emerge that if we continue with the task force, we'll be setting ourselves up for a situation that will not be helpful for the future of the SAC and potentially divide many of us. And I don't want to see that happen, so I cannot support extending it. And I've said a lot here, and I'm sure it was difficult to hear some of that, but I hold out hope based on past experience, because I've seen how difficult conversations can result in stronger relationships. And I want to work with you, Brian, and I am listening. So we have so much to work through and achieve as a team. I hope we can do that through our misgivings on this issue and be effective and successful for the citizens of Yankton.
Any other commissioners have a comment, or what is the pleasure of the commission? Yeah,
I would
go
just
ahead,
like to-
Commissioner
I
Huh.
guess I said this out of turn, sorry, but I did talk to Charlie a few hours before that meeting, and at that time, Charlie indicated an interest in serving if the commission approved extending it. Obviously, he changed his mind during the meeting, Nathan, but I'd take a little bit of offense that you would say I lied about that.
I was questioning whether it was a lie or misleading, so I accept
okay.
your explanation, so thank you, Brian.
Okay. I want to get back and forth here, but is there any, Commissioner Ha, if you had mentioned you wanted to make a motion, did you want to do that, or?
Well, I know there's public that wants to speak. Do you want me to make the motion first, or do you want the public to?
Yes, I want a motion
Okay.
on the floor so the public knows
Well,
what they're speaking to, if there is
I
one.
want clear direction, and I listed a lot of details, and I can work with Al later, but I just moved that we would appoint a 2-year Summit Activities Center Advisory Committee made up primarily of some former task force members and a few new additions to just continue to collect public input and monitor the progression of all the goals and all the recommendations that have been made. I see it as a no-cost a way to continue to encourage public input. I don't really see the negatives. And so my motion is to create that task force for a 2-year period to meet quarterly the first Thursday of every month at the Summit Center.
Thank you. I was going to ask for a shorter version. All right, so to create a 2-year task force to meet the first Thursday quarterly is, did I get that correct? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. I would open it up for further commission discussion.
I would just say I feel like the waters get muddy by having a second advisory to sort of shadow the Parks Advisory as a citizen of Yankton living along the Missouri. I should celebrate muddy waters, right? But in this case, I feel like it gets really tricky for staff. Like when the survey was coming out, who do we send that survey to? How does that happen? What's the order? How does input come back to staff? I feel like the task force set its goal, achieved its goal, gave city staff a robust list of recommendations that staff is implementing. I don't think we should be bad or feel bad or mad or sad about this. This is the process. A task force set its task, completed its task, has now handed things off to staff. We have the city SAC committee, we have Parks Advisory, we have systems in place to monitor. Certainly, anybody that would have any commentary about wanting to do something different with fitness, or, hey, what about this machine? They would know how to access you or other members of the task force. I guess I'm just worried about, like I said, muddying the waters in terms of communication. And I think the systems are already in place, and I think this is a tried and true system, and it's part of the task force notes that if there is an issue, that we can always reconvene down the road. I mean, that's been understood from the beginning. I just don't see any reason to continue it and seek input that goes into, it gets very confusing, I think, when you're trying to direct staff, and I think staff is asking for clarity, so.
Anybody else on the commission?
I had stated before that I would be in favor of doing it within a year's time after the task force had completed its job, if we feel like it is necessary. I do think that there needs to be a period of time in between. We've had the task force. They have the direction from the task force. I think we need to give it time to see if that direction, what things of that direction have worked, what things have not. If within it, after a year's time from the end of the task force, if we want to revisit this, because we feel like there needs to be direction, I would be in favor of it in that time, but I do think that there needs to be an end to the task force, and there needs to be a moratorium time in between that this is the end, and then perhaps at a later date, in years' time, what have you, that this is a new beginning, instead of it just being a continuation where, so here's a recommendation, this is what we want to do. No, wait, we're going to throw that, we're going to keep going, and we're going to give you other, it ends up being, I think, it spins people in directions that I don't think are beneficial. I think I don't see the benefit of it. I do see the benefit of there being a period of time in between. That's my viewpoint right now.
And I would just to finish my thought, I think we just have to be patient. Like I said, the list of recommendations is robust. We're only to the end of June. We don't know how the summer numbers are going to look. That's playing out as we speak. And then we can analyze that through Parks Advisory, but the fall looks different than winter, looks different than spring in terms of fitness, and we have recommendations that affect marketing and promotion and equipment and staffing. There's so many things that we're trying to implement. I think we should focus on the things that we've set up. The task force set up some goals that we can try to achieve, and I think, and it's one of the things I'm worst at personally and professionally, is being patient. I think we just have to be patient and let some things play out before we continue to seek, before we have an advisory group trying to tweak too many things.
Sorry about that. Other commission thoughts? Otherwise, I will open it up to the public.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'd like to
Commissioner
comment on
Villanueva.
this too. So after the hours of face-to-face, emails, texts, phone calls that I've had over the last few days, which I've said this before and I'll say it again, I absolutely value public input. We don't operate in a vacuum, so any input we can get is appreciated, and I do appreciate that direction. I do agree with Commissioner Brunick. I do think that it's important to, when you have a list of recommendations, to allow those recommendations to come to fruition. As I was doing my homework, and I apologize for being gone at this last meeting, I was out of the country, but I also see that it does concern me that I feel that as I'm watching the last commission video that we're not on the same page about what the recommendations either are or were. I think that should be pretty clear, but evidently there's, according to one of the commissioners, like four versions potentially of the recommendations. I just think it's important to allow these recommendations to play out. I do value the input, so I do agree with Commissioner Brunick. I would love to see this, give it a year, and as this does play out, be patient, as Commissioner Minor said, be patient with it, and if we need to pivot at that point, well then let's potentially reconvene as a public group, and then make some tweaks at that point. So I would support something that Commissioner Brunick, if we get to that point, maybe a year from now.
All right, anybody, sorry, before I did that, I didn't turn to the right. I went left and I try to look both ways. Anybody on the commission have other thoughts? Otherwise, I will open it up to the public. Not that you can't comment after the public does as well. So is there anybody in the public that wants to address the commission on this motion? If you can please state your name for the listening millions, Brian.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Brian Birch. I live at 3013 Mulligan Drive here in Yankton. I was one of the members of the Summit Center Task Force. All the comments that across the commission, they're all 100% valid. Everybody has opinions. Everybody has a little bit different takeaways, but everyone is making good points. The task force goal, I'm reading from the agenda of March 20th, 2022. I think that's a typo, it should be 2023. The goal of the Summit Activities Citizens Task Force is to develop recommendations to the Yankton City Commission to improve the operations, grow membership, and promote the use of the facility. That was the charter of the message. And at the very bottom of this page, below the meeting schedule, it says the City Commission will determine what recommendations to budget for and implement, as that is your jobs. The task force may be asked to reconvene and work through specific items. And I think where we're at, there's some divide. Should it be the task force? Should it be a citizens advisory board? I believe, as Mr. Brunick stated, that there's a lengthy list of recommendations that we came forward with, and we recognize that not all of them can be acted upon in a short period of time or a long period of time. I think the idea that I would suggest is to have an advisory group, somewhere where we can continue to meet and generate ideas, watch and see what happens with the current things that are in place. Are they working? Are they not working? Can we tweak them? There is some paternal ownership, if you would, in this endeavor. Because we served on the committee, we took a lot of time to study and learn. And I think to just let that kind of waste away is potentially a disservice. Also, I would look at this portion of the advisory board, if you would, as not only idea generation, but kind of as ambassadors for the Summit Activity Center, where we can listen to the input from the members, gather input from the city, and help the SAC. And we really passionately want this thing to to continue to succeed and thrive, and cost the city less money if we can get that accomplished. That was the mandate. I don't know what kind of term limit it needs to be. To Mr. Bernie's point, should be a year. Brian's point, 2 years. Who knows? That's up for you to decide if you choose to do so. But I think there was a lot of time and talent and on this task force, and I think that to let that go by the wayside may be short-sighted. I appreciate your time, and thank you for consideration.
Thanks, Brian. I know in talking to a couple of points that Brian mentioned, one, thank him again, I know I did the other night, for agreeing to serve on the Parks Advisory Board. One of the thoughts, kind of giving you my thoughts on this, because it was one of the things as the citizens came forward, I wanted to put together a task force that shared their thoughts, as I see Vince getting ready to come to the podium. We had a lot of great feedback when the public showed up to our regular meetings that I felt we wanted to hear that. I intentionally did a task force for the fact that it starts and ends, and then we can take all those great ideas, and there were lots of them. So I do want to, again, thank the task force members who agreed to serve on it. There was a lot of discussions and a lot of really good conversations on thoughts that we could share with Todd, with Luke, and the rest of the Summit Activities Center and city staff that they could move forward on with what was feasible with the limitations of space or our agreements with the school district, money, all of those things. But a lot of good things came forward that were able to be implemented right away, and then some things, obviously, that might take a little time to marinate or figure out if it's a good fit for that facility. So our goal when we met that last night was to see how do we continue to have the good works moving forward, and that's where the thoughts of the Parks Advisory Board came forward. And that night we had talked about that being a good idea. It's a committee that meets actually every other month, so they meet 6 times a year when they meet, not quarterly, so there's a couple extra meetings there. And by adding this on involves the same people that are on the Parks Advisory Board as far as city staff. So as they're preparing updates and discussion points for our parks, which include fitness and all those other types of activities that go on in our parks, to us it made sense, and I say us as the group that was there that night, it seemed to make sense to add positions to the Parks Advisory Board that would be just that still could be ambassadors. Mr. Larson could come to the Parks Advisory Board, provide Summit Activity Center updates, thoughts, suggestions. Those that are serving, that are Summit members, could then have those discussions in that format of a group that was already organized. So wanted to give a little thought on that, and that's to us where it made sense, because it's a group that's already meeting. They're focusing on everything that goes on our parks, which tends to be a lot of fitness when you look at pools and tennis courts and pickleball courts and frisbee frolf or golf or whatever they call it. I can't even throw a regular frisbee, let alone trying to aim one at a net. But so it seemed like it felt a good place for that to reside, to kind of go back to some of what Commissioner Brunick and Villanueva said, to give those ideas a chance to marinate, but still giving city staff the opportunity to, as those ideas marinate or thoughts come about, to have a group that meets regularly to be able to continue those discussions and be that sounding board. I would hope that the community would know, as Commissioner Villanueva said, that you can come talk to us at any point. Obviously, you can talk to anybody that was on the Summit Activities Task Force. I know they'd be happy to share thoughts. Bring those to Luke or any staff at the Summit Activities Center. You know, we do want to see this succeed. We want to see this as a viable option for citizens in our community. It does meet our mission statement, and so it was felt that evening that this was a good fit to give that a try, to still have those voices being heard in an organized city community or a city advisory board that was already in place, that was already talking about fitness. And maybe there's ways we can unite the parks and the Summit Activities Center more. We saw it this year. We brought a couple classes to the Youth or Family Aquatic Center. And, those took our instructors, some of the instructors from the summit are doing dual classes or move those. So is there ways that we can extend that? Maybe taking some yoga classes out at Riverside Park or doing things like that. So I do think maybe we could actually get some more cross ideas of overall fitness in our community, not just as it's tied to the Summit Activity Center. So those were thoughts as kind of things that were marinating. I wanted to bring forward that as well. So Vince, come on up. Sorry. You were on your way and then I turned my mic on. You should have known better. No, I'm teasing. Go ahead and give your name for those that don't know.
Most people know who I am, Vince Shenis. I served also on the committee with Brian, and I must admit that we made a lot of progress with this committee, and it was well received. And my only concern with the whole process here is when I got on the committee, I was under the impression it'd be a long-term thing too. I didn't think our work would be done in 8 weeks. And I, having served on many boards, 8 weeks isn't enough for this. I really feel you should take a look at an advisory board for this, because this is the crown jewel of your community park system. The Summit Activity Center isn't closed down in 8 weeks like the city pool is. The programming's changed, like you said, Commissioner Minor. The seasons change with this. Unless we keep our fingers on what's going on with that center, I feel you need to react soon if something isn't working, rather than let's wait a year and see if things work out. I'd rather see us be more proactive than reactive. And that's what we were at 8 months ago. We were sitting at a reactive phase. We've made a lot of progress. I'd like to see it continue moving forward, and have a small group of volunteers. We're not trying to push anybody around and tell the city staff what to do. We're just trying to keep our fingers on a positive flow right now and make sure it continues to stay going. Does that make sense? I mean, that's all we're trying to do. We're trying to help the community, the city, in the operations of a very vital city organization. I think it needs to be kept in the forefront. I don't know if the present situation with being on the park board with so little representation that it doesn't get the justice it needs through the park board, because there's so many things in the park system. The park system in this community is amazing. That's why we moved here. It's a great place, but the park staff has a lot to do. I think they would welcome some good input from us. We're not trying to run the thing. We're just trying to give what we see as advice and recommendations, and continue with those recommendations as they move with them. You always have a to-do list. Once the to-do list is empty, you need more things to do. Or we need to visit those things that we did do and say, did they work or didn't they work? And make changes or make recommendations. So my advice is I'm just going to say is I would strongly recommend that you really do consider a separate advisory commission for that, or not commission, a separate advisory committee or board, and for the Summit Center, because number one, it's your crown jewel. It's the crown jewel of the whole rec department. Hundreds of people use that facility every day, 7 days a week. And more people are using it. Every day I walk in there, this summer I walk in there. Usually that's a dead time of year for indoor facilities. I walked in there the other day and the pool is full, the weight room has dozens of people in it, the pickleball court's full. It's great to see. And that was the result of, we got after it. Why can't we keep being after it? I don't see the big deal in it, okay? I think it's a good thing, and I think you'd be well received if you kept a good thing, okay?
Thanks, Vince. And if you're up at the summit and you're not walking fast enough on the treadmill, he'll let you know. Just kidding, Vince. It was just me. I think he was thinking I wasn't walking fast enough. All right. Go ahead.
Judy Vanderhul. Just some points of clarification. I remember being here about a year ago. Many of the same people in the room tonight were here. And at that time, I think the advisory task force, was created because at that time, we were all very concerned because the Summit Center was not bringing in a lot of money, and it was being a drag on the general fund. And I believe the commission was also looking at that time about maybe bringing in a private source to take over the Summit Center. I don't know if you're still thinking about that. But so point of clarification, I hear a lot of objection to the task force continuing. And I will say, task forces are not meant to be forever. They are meant to accomplish a certain task. That's why they're called a task force. But some other suggestions have come forward about an advisory committee. But so if task force ends and you don't do the advisory committee, or your suggestion maybe adding a couple of the task force people onto the Parks Advisory Committee, who would make all these suggestions? How would you operate? Would it go back to just the staff doing it all? That's the point of clarification. What are our choices here? Task force, advisory committee, or what?
I think, great question, and up for discussion, and where it was brought up is the task force did make a recommendation for the city. Commissioner Hunoff now is asking the commission to revise the task force findings, and city staff is asking for clarification so they can move forward. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Judy?
Yes, and that's what I'm hearing, but I'm hearing some resistance from the commission to the task force, so I don't know. And Commissioner Brunig had an idea 1 year for a time, some sort of lapse in between. Anyway, so there are some suggestions on the board. I just wanted that clarification. And then just a little suggestion about communication, because there's tension in the room. And I don't like it when there's tension in the room. But anyway, a wise person once told me years ago, the definition of miscommunication, and it goes like this. I know you think you understand what it is you thought I said, but what you don't realize is what you heard isn't what I meant. So everybody give each other a little lapse. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Charlie, were you making your way up, or were you just standing to stretch? Oh, somebody else was good. Okay, you're in line. I got it. Thanks for keeping traffic control.
Thank you. Eugene Hornster, 301 Northern Avenue. Relative to the semantics of the situation of task force and advisory, I probably being redundant here, but basically it seems there's a matter of more than semantics here. You have a situation here that's not static with the Summit Activity Center. It's dynamic and changing, and therefore to have an advisory committee, and this is redundant, pardon me, but I know it is, basically monitor what's taking place, and when these changes take place, make advisories. That's the point of this, and I do think what Judy says is very important, and semantics and understanding and clear communication. We need to work on that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could state your name for the two people who have no idea who you are.
Charlie Gross, 1510 Burley, and I was also a member of the task force, and there seems to be some confusion about what I said 2 weeks ago. Number one, I was never asked about extending the life of the task force. I was asked if the task force life was extended, would I continue to serve? And the answer to that question was yes. I did not change my mind during the meeting. I entered the task force with the understanding it would be a short-term commitment. We talked about 4 months. That's what it was. We presented recommendations to the commission, and now it's up to the commission to make a decision based on what those recommendations are. And so, as I said 2 weeks ago, with Brian Birch and Brian Hunoff on the Park Advisory Board going forward, they will not ignore the Summit Activity Center. With what's transpired over the last 8 months, the Summit Activity Center is not going to be ignored. Okay? I rest my case.
Thank you. Anybody else in the public? Oh.
Jim Means, 701 West Riverside Drive. And I had no intention of talking on this subject. I've been coming here in the last couple of meetings just to kind of see what's going on, and I'm kind of interested in the paradigm deal. But I've been on the Planning Commission, I've been on the Park Board, been on the City Commission, and one thing I know for sure, that every recommendation by the Planning Commission and the Park Board is not accepted by the City Commission, knowing that from both sides. I sat right next to Jerry on the City Commission when I was there. But the one thing, I think, a little bit of what Judy said, I don't think anybody's here is trying to do anything except for do what they think is best for the city. And I think that's the primary thing. The fact that Brian decided to go to his kid's event rather than stay for the last hour when the decision was made, it shouldn't have any bearing on this. It should be what's in the best interest of keeping the Summit Center open and making it productive and making it a good part of the community. And we wouldn't be having this discussion today if Brian hadn't been over-enthusiastic about keeping the Summit. It had been closed or something else would have happened to it. And it brought him to run for the City Commission, and he's maybe a little bit over-enthusiastic and maybe pushing a little hard. And I had a boss years ago that used to tell me that he said, you know, you're out of this, you need to get it. Call him. You know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And at one time, I think I was in kind of Brian's position, and I was pushing pretty hard for something. And he says, you're pushing pretty hard on it, aren't you? And I said, yeah, you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And he said, it's also the first to be replaced. And so, I mean, I think you need to all just take a breath and try to do what's in the best for the Summit Center. And it just seems to me that the Park Board is not a great place to go. I've been on the Park Board. There are many, many things on that. And right now, I think the Summit Center needs to be helped along. I'm not a member of the Summit Center. I do have a Great Life membership. I go there occasionally. And over the winter, there was a lot of activity there when I went. But I just think everybody has to take a break, take a breath, and do what's in the best to try to make the Summit Center be successful. And it seems to me that these people that have been working on it are probably your best bet. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else in the public? Anybody on the commission?
Sorry, Judy Vanderheel, if you'll indulge me, I did forget. I did want to also support, and it can be a temporary advisory committee. I read through the recommendations that the task force made, and there's a lot of enthusiasm. There was a lot of thought. There was a lot of creativity in that. And I'm sure it wasn't just the committee, it was probably staff members as well. It was well done, and there's still a lot of enthusiasm. So I would support at least giving it a little more go. And like I say, everybody take a deep breath and as Jim said, do what's best from your own heart.
Thanks, Judy. Anybody else in the public? Anybody on the commission?
I would like to state my thought again on the interim time in between. You are right. I'm absolutely trying to do what I think is right for the Summit Activity Center. From that viewpoint, my viewpoint is that I think it is beneficial to have a task force end, like what we had talked about. And like Vincent mentioned, there's a long laundry list of things to work on. And I think that there is, and that list is nowhere near run out. I think that those things are things that can certainly be worked on at this time. It's direction, which is what the task force was set up to do, was to give direction. We give direction. Here's the laundry list of things. We give it a period of time, which doesn't need to be a year from this evening's decision. It could be a year from when the task force ended. And then we can set up, if we feel like it's necessary, we can set up a Summit Activities Center Advisory Board. Now before, Brian, I believe you had mentioned it being a 2-year, correct?
Right. Nathan kind of criticized me for changing it from 3 years to 2 years. I was trying to make it more palatable to the city commission.
Okay. And I'm not trying to put a time limit on that, saying that it's only going to be for 2 years. What I'm saying is I'd like there to be an interim time so that from a staff's perspective and from the Summit's activities centers, that there's a breathing period. So there's not a whiplash of now here's more direction, here's more to add to that list. So I would like to see that, and then if that becomes the Summit Activity Advisory Board turns into an advisory board that continues on past 2 years, I'm just fine with that if we feel like that's necessary. I do believe though that we need an end of one and then a time frame for a beginning of another if we choose that that's what is best. That's my viewpoint, and it comes from a point of trying to do what I think is the right thing to do for the Summit Activity Center, because I want to see the thing, I'm for it. I'm here because I'm for the community. I want to be part of it, and I want the community to go forward, and we can have different opinions on these things, but I'm supposed to have an opinion, and that's where I'm at now.
Any other commission discussion?
I do have one thing I want to add. So I do agree with Commissioner Brunick, but one of the issues I'm still having is that, again, what we were presented from the task force, is that or is that not what the task force brought forward? Because again, what concerns me is we're getting these, that is what was brought forward, that's not what we said. I just want to know, as I was watching the previous meeting, do we have exactly what was brought forward? And that's my question.
The only recommendation that I think any of us are questioning is one, and that is whether we should continue as an advisory committee. We're not criticizing any of the other recommendations.
Mike, I was on that committee, and the task force recommended what Mayor Mosier proposed tonight and last meeting, and that we add 2 members of the task force of the Summit Center to the Parks Advisory Board committee. There's mechanisms in place already in government. We have the Parks Advisory Board. I polled quite a few people in the last 2 weeks, I'd say 10 to 12 people, and showed them the list of the advisory boards and say, where do you think the Summit Center falls in? And it was Parks Advisory Board. It makes sense logically that that's where it should fall. And in this mechanism that we have in place now, with 2 members being on the Parks Advisory Board, those members can have public input from the members of the Summit Center and take it back to the Parks Advisory Board. They also, anyone can attend the Parks Advisory Board meeting and provide their input. That mechanism is in place, and this talk about wanting to continue the task force into something else just seems like we're assuming the solution that the task force recommended is automatically going to fail. And that's what I'm having a problem with, is because we're not testing it out. We're not waiting to see if it's going to work or not. We can always reconvene the task force if it's not working. And if there's a fear that we're going to close the summit if it's not working, I think that fear should be alleviated because we have this task force that we can reconvene. So I'm in favor of doing what the task force recommended and continuing with that mechanism we have in place rather than create a whole new layer of government that we don't need because we have this mechanism as of right now. Maybe down the road that's something that is needed, but right now let's do what we have. Let's use what we have in place.
Any other thoughts from the commission? Al, can you please read back the motion before I ask for roll call?
And I certainly stand open to corrections, Commissioner Hanoff. But I think your motion was to appoint a 2-year task force to meet quarterly the first Thursday of each quarter, period. And that was seconded by Schramm.
Thank you for reading that back. Roll call.
Johnson.
No.
Minor.
No.
Schramm.
No.
Villanueva.
No.
Weber.
No.
Benson.
No.
Brunig.
No.
Hanoff.
Yes.
Mayor Mosier.
No. No. So with that, motion fails on a vote of 8-1. Amy, do you feel you have the direction then to continue to move forward with the task force recommendations, or do you need something else from the commission?
Yes, I'm clear, thank you.
All right, moving on to new business. Number 1 is consideration of memorandum 23-105, requesting approval for an expenditure of up to $10,000 from the Triple B to assist in moving the Yankton Territorial Museum historic displays to the Mead Building and cleaning up and reseeding the remainder of the West Side Park property. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Mayor Mosier.
Aye, motion carries. Number 2 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-107 and resolution 23-24, recommending the proposed special events handbook application, forms, and fees in resolution 23-24 for events being held in 2024 and beyond. I have asked City Manager Leon to walk us through exactly what's being proposed tonight. And while she's pulling that up, I was excited to see this come forward. We talk about another group that was put together to discuss things. So my thanks to, I know your tasks are not done yet by any means, Commissioners Minor, Villanueva, Johnson, and Benson for serving on this. I think it's a good cross-reference of those that you all bring as far as tied to events that you brought tonight. So I'm excited to have City Manager Leon walk us through what's being proposed tonight.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the commission and public. I'll try to be brief here. This was born out of a discussion we had last year regarding our special events. So we're getting a little bit more professional, trying to be a little bit more professional with our special events, and we've come a long way from when I first started here, just assisting with some setup for Riverboat Days and a few other smaller events, to really having almost every summer weekend filled with either a private event that we're helping to stage or a event that we're hosting. And so because of that, we wanted to make some changes both to the special events application so that we make sure that we have what we feel is necessary to put on a safe and secure event for people in the public, as well as to talk a little bit about the effort that goes into the special events. So, for example, the 4th of July celebration will be an all-hands-on-deck type of situation where we'll spend a number of days prepping to get picnic tables and trash receptacles and proper restroom facilities. Now, that happens to be something that is the city's event, and we're putting that on. But when we're assisting others with their events, there's also a lot of labor that goes into that. So the fees that you see associated are not covering our costs by any stretch of the imagination, but what we put together is a tier system for different types of events, and a fee associated with those. We think a nominal fee for having those events, as well as a fee for utilizing items like traffic cones and the parking, no parking signs, traffic barrels, etc. One change we've made unilaterally is requiring that the event have an electrician to contact if they have electrical needs. Our city staff, we don't have a licensed electrician on staff, and we've done our best to try to help folks, but are unable to do electrical work. Also, we ask that people, we'll provide trash receptacles, that they provide their own dumpster and hire a private company for the trash that the event creates. Also, some things have been added to the special events application that are important. We believe emergency response plan. So if there's a high wind or active weather event, there's a plan in advance that the event organizers and our special events department can share with Chief Foote and with Chief Linke, as well as with our dispatchers, and so that we're ready to help respond if need to be, and emergency management can be informed. Also, requiring insurance and proof of insurance. We've said before that we'd like people to be insured, but having that proof of insurance before we give the nod to the event to move forward. So trying to bring a little more clarity and communication again to these types of events. As the mayor indicated, this has gone through several renditions of the committee, and if this is approved tonight, you'll be approving both the application and the fees effective 2024, so none of this will be impacting special events for this summer. Also, for the public's benefit, we included Mr. John Kraft on this committee. He's active in the riverboat days, because we felt that as far as special events go, that's kind of the main one for Yankton, and we wanted to make sure that we had some good knowledge from event-based planning folks, and Commissioner Villanueva is also involved in riverboat days, but we wanted to have his perspective, not being involved on the commission. So he's been a part of that group as well, and we continue to work with him on the committee. So I'll answer detailed questions if you have them. Our next step here in this committee is to do some visioning actually for event spaces, so that when we come together at strategic planning and budget session, you all have some ideas to work off of.
Thank you for that, and would be remiss not to also thank the number of citizens, as you mentioned, Mr. Kraft being one of them, but several citizens, correct, Amy, that serve on this committee as well, that are more event organizers in town.
Well, we've had no other citizens standing, but we've had ad hoc folks who've helped us walk through this. For example, Ben Hanton of Ben's Brewing we've talked with, and we've talked to many other city officials from other first-class cities, and as we need advice, getting that advice.
Thank you for that. Thank you for walking us through that. With that understanding, what's the pleasure of the commission?
Move to approve.
Second.
We do have a motion and a second. Want to ask if there's any commission discussion. One of the questions I had, Amy, and if I missed it in the packet, I apologize. We won't charge for equipment, so if somebody wants to be in the park, we wouldn't charge for like picnic tables and stuff like that. If there's stuff already at a venue that they want to use for an event and we don't have to move it in.
Correct. So
Okay.
if you're, if you're if you've rented the shelter and, the picnic tables are there, we're talking about the large-scale rib fest. Name another one. It's, rock and rumble, third on third, those types of things where we're spending time moving barricades and picnic tables and things of that nature.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. That was something I had thought of.
I've got one question, just in regards to the electrician that is on the event organization, and there isn't necessarily a set, like, here's your electricians, they just need to be a licensed electrician. I'm looking for clarification on that.
Correct. So what's happened is over time, there, a band or another large electrical user will utilize power boards that are downtown, and there's an issue. And so maybe no one there not having any electrical expertise, they naturally have called the city. And we have tried to help them whenever we can. And so far, it's been successful. But, the extent of our knowledge for electrical work is limited, and we're not licensed to do any work beyond, just our troubleshooting. And so we ask that person doesn't need to be there. They just need to have someone that they can contact if they were having an issue setting up. And so we're not left to try to scramble and find. We've had a lot of goodwill on behalf of electricians in town to come in and help us because the things that get over our head too, but we want to make sure they're making that contact since it's their event.
Other commission questions, discussion?
I would just say that we spent a lot of time hammering out the details. There are a lot more words, I think, in this now, right? It increased exponentially, but everything that we discussed at the heart of that was, clarification, communication, and how to best collaborate with entities that want to have events in town. And I personally think we've moved in a direction that's going to be beneficial for staff, for citizens, and for anybody that participates in the events.
Yeah, and I think if you look around what's going around the world, I love the safety component and just kind of getting groups that are going to be holding large events to think about that. Unfortunately, things do happen at events, and to get event organizers having a thought about what may happen if something would come in or blow in or anything like that, I think is a great idea too. So kudos on thinking about the safety part of it as well.
I did want to say one thing to Mayor Mosier. I just want to say, again, echo the thank you to all the city staff, the commissioners, the private people that we had on this board. We spent a lot of time making this as thoughtful and as palatable and fair as possible. And I think we ended up with a really good product. So thanks.
Great. This will be good because now we can put it to use with the Meridian Bridge planning group. I'll be able to use all of these good thoughts when they put their ideas together. Any questions, comments from the community? If you could state your name, Nancy, that would be great.
Absolutely. Nancy and Andy.
For the other two people that don't know Charlie and you, so that they know.
Representing Yankton Thrive 803 East 4th Street. As an organization that works with a lot of people who plan events, I want to say thank you to staff for putting this type of a document together. It is so helpful for organizers to have a clear path and some direction on what they need to do, because there's so much confusion when you're hosting large events or you're not a seasoned event planner. So kudos to you guys for moving this forward.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, we love folks in Yankton, lots of good ideas and people willing to have events, but, having clear direction, I think, and all in an organized manner, I think, as I think City Manager Leon said, that professional look of what we can provide, I think is good too. Any other questions, thoughts from the community? Anybody else on the commission? Roll call.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 3 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-115 regarding a use restriction on city-owned land to create a clear area for a school district propane tank installation on the adjoining property. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 4 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-108 regarding the request by the City of Yankton Parks and Recreation Department for a fireworks display on July 4th, 2023. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
Everybody wants fireworks. We do have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Would just caution the public to read the commission packet in that the bridge will be closed at some points to get ready for that, and then obviously shooting it off the bridge as we usually do. So now that it's officially passed, please watch for that for the users of the bridge. That would be great. Number 5 is consideration of memorandum 23-118 regarding resolution 23-25, support for Yankton Thrive's housing infrastructure program funding application for Garden Estates. This is the 26 acres west of Westbrook Estates. This resolution, as stated, is showing our support for this project through Yankton Thrive. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion? Anybody in the public?
Once again, Nancy and Andy, Yankton Thrive, 803 East 4th Street. The resolution that you're being asked to pass tonight will be only one small component of the overall package that will need to be submitted to South Dakota Housing for either a grant or loan request. Those applications are not yet available for us to view, but we have received notice that the resolution is one of the components. And so they know that the governing bodies in some communities only meet once a month. So that's why we brought this forward to you, because we did receive that advance notice from South Dakota Housing on this. So I just wanted to let you know there might be other items coming forward, and we appreciate your cooperation in helping Yankton develop more housing so we can have more employees and our businesses can continue to thrive.
Thanks, Nancy. Appreciate everything Yankton Thrive is doing in workforce and housing development. As stated, a much needed in our community. Anybody else from the public? Roll call.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Number 6 under new business is consideration of memorandum 23-116, recommending a bid award for the Elm Street reconstruction from 20th Street to 21st Street be awarded to Katzer Concrete Incorporated in the amount of $479,995. This would be for removing the existing street section, installing new water main, and installing new concrete street, and we'll be replacing any driveway approaches and miscellaneous sidewalk. In your commission packet, you do see this is $54,995 over budget, but $7,634.50 lower than the most recent engineer estimate. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion?
Pardon me, Mayor Mosher, if I might. I just want to make the public aware, I did make the commission aware, but wanted to make the public aware that both of the projects, street projects you're going to take a look at tonight, do meet the requirements of our active transportation plan. However, they only include sidewalk on one side of the street. We only require that sidewalk be placed on both sides of the street for arterials and collectors, according to our current active transportation plan. And these are all local streets, so they're only required to have sidewalk on one side. And a couple things here to think about too. The projects are over the original budget, over the engineering estimate. So cost was a factor, but also just the dynamics of the project themselves. So, but I just wanted to be clear and upfront about that, because I think last year we had a discussion about complete streets, which we always strive for. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that for the public.
Did have a quick question. Between Katzer and masonry components, we're what, like $70,000 difference? We're good with there's nothing missed on that? I'm just asking.
Our city engineer is saying, nope, that's correct. So just a close bid.
Thank you.
Any other commission questions, comments? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Bruning. Aye. Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber.
Aye.
Benson.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. And number 7, under new business, is consideration of memorandum 23-117, recommending a bid award for the 3rd Street reconstruction from Spruce Street to Green Street, and Green Street reconstruction from 3rd Street to 4th Street, be awarded to Masonry Component Incorporated in the amount of $715,245.10. And as you can see, again, another project slightly over the engineer's most recent estimate. What is your pleasure?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any commission discussion?
I have very mixed feelings about this. It runs in front of my house. It's going to be a mess for a whole summer, I'm sure. But I'm really grateful for a new street. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
It took me a second when you said that, Commissioner Weber. I'm like, what? Oh, I had to think about the address. Any other commission thoughts or questions? Anybody in the public? Roll call.
Hanoff.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Minor.
Aye.
Schramm.
Aye.
Villanueva.
Aye.
Weber, before you vote, I'd caution you to remember what Attorney Denherter said earlier about, what was that, the 2 words there?
Arbitrary and capricious.
Yes. With that being said, your vote?
Aye. Thanks for clarification.
Benson.
Aye.
Brunig.
Aye.
Mayor Moser.
Aye, motion carries. Somebody will just have to hire Commissioner Weber, a cleaning person that can come in and help her keep her house all tidy. All right. With that, there is no other business in front of the City Commission tonight. So following that, then I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting of June 26, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Anybody abstaining? Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, folks.